Today's talk, I will try to address one question which is often asked by people, this question which I just now mentioned, that why is it that some people simply sit by themselves? Why don't they come out? This I mentioned in one of the classes, I think distance classes. The people ask this question, why don't enlightened people come out and teach people? The simple answer is, once you call them enlightened, they know what to do. You don't tell them what they have to do. Let them decide. You are accepting their perceptivity is higher than yours. You are accepting their experience of life is much deeper than yours. So let them decide. It is up to them. In any case, the notion that help to others happens only through physical means is a very, very narrow perspective of life. It is our limited perception that gives out that statement that help means talking to somebody, help means giving something to somebody. This is also help, yes, physical help, verbal help is also help. But don't say, just because I cannot see anything else, nothing else exists. Whatever is not in my perception cannot exist, does not exist, is ignorance. So, let us not just go by our definition of work or karma or help. There may be many more layers to existence that is invisible to us. How do I accept this? Should I go by faith? There are some indications towards this. There are many. I will randomly pick up 2 or 3. One of the popular ones in this regard is the experiments that were conducted in the 80s and the 90s by the Institute of Maharshi Mahesh Yogi. Transcendental meditation, that was their technique. And their hypothesis, their prediction was that in a given town, in a given city, if a particular percentage, I think 1% or something, they arrived at some number based on some quantum physics criterion. So if 1% of the population practices that transcendental meditation, they predicted that the whole city will undergo some transformation. It will change the psyche of the city. All the other people get influenced in a better way. Their lifestyle will improve, something better will happen. One of the predictions given was that the crime rate will reduce. And they did it in many cities. They did it in Washington, they did it in Milan, they did it in India also, in New Delhi. In some places, the effect was more than other cities. In Washington, when they predicted this, in 1993, I think, when the meditators predicted that crime rate will go down, they even predicted the percentage. I don't know how. They said by minimum this much percentage the crime rate will go down. We will just sit and meditate. We will not do anything else. And the police commissioner of Washington, D.C., he mocked them. He said the only thing that can reduce crime rate in this city is 20 inches of snow, not meditation. They did it for just 2 months. Around, I think, 800 to 4,000 meditators. The number varied in the period of 2 months. They just engaged in their meditation in a particular place. They did it in, I think, in the June or July of that year. In the first 5 months, or in the previous records, the statistics of Washington, D.C., the police records, crime rate was constantly increasing, or it was almost at a particular rate. And as soon as this happened, as soon as a few thousand people started meditating in Washington, D.C., from the very first week itself, crime rate started dropping. And it finally dropped by 23%, which Washington had never seen until then. It dropped by 23%. And when they did a statistical study of this, the probability of that happening by random chance, by fluke, is 2 in a billion. It cannot happen just like that. And then later they have done it in many other cities. I think in Washington DC it was only violent crimes that was considered, not all type of crimes, violent crimes. And in New Delhi, it I think reduced by 11 or 12%. All crimes reduced by 11-12%. So now if you look at this, which they have repeated, they have reproduced it in many other cities also. If you wonder about this, what is happening? Crime rate is reducing, the psyche of criminals or the tendency of people committing crime is reducing, not by counseling them, not by giving them anything, you are just sitting on your own and experiencing absolute stillness, and that is influencing others around you. Is this not the greatest form of help that you can do? Help is simply happening. They are not even trying to help anybody. You do something with yourself, others around you will get helped. There are other instances. Another prominent instance, which it is probably not so popular as this transcendental meditation, it is slowly becoming popular now. It is called Ho'oponopono. It is not from India. It is a technique which is from Polynesian islands. And the one prominent incident that happened in relation to this is in Hawaii, which is part of USA now. There is, I don't know if it is there now, in the 80s, there was a mental hospital in Hawaii, a government mental hospital, which was treating or which was simply keeping criminals who are mentally ill, like serial killers and people, seriously violent people who have lost their mental balance. And it was their asylum. It was mental asylum for such people. And nobody liked to do work there because those people are extremely aggressive. You cannot even go near them. The only way to control them is give some medicines and anesthesia and keep them dull. That is the only treatment that mostly they do there. Nurses and doctors never wanted to work there because you may get beaten up by those people. They are always chained, extremely violent people. In 1984, a man named Dr. Hugh Len was appointed there, and he was trained in this Ho'oponopono technique. And what he did was, he will go through the patient's record. He will see the name of the patient and go through the record. He will not meet the patient. He will not talk to the patient. He will not do anything. He will go away. He will just see the record and he will go away. And the patient starts getting better. Within 3 years, from 1984, he joined in 1984. By 1987, the entire ward was shut down because all the patients became normal. The ward was shut down. The mental asylum was shut down because all the patients got normal. And they asked him, "What did you do? You didn't even talk to anybody. What did you do? How did you make them better?" This is very difficult to understand. I suggest you go and read. If you try to think about it logically, it is very difficult to understand. In his own words, he said, if something is happening in front of you, if some incident is taking place in front of you, you are responsible for that. If you are exposed to a particular type of information, that is the information that is running in your consciousness. You are responsible for that. If you go deep within you and if you erase that information, that will not happen in front of you. This is the simple thing that he said, that it's like, it is like when you dream, if you refuse to process certain information, that will not manifest in your dream. He's talking something in some similar terms. He's saying, if you go deep within you and if you refuse to process that information, if you delete that particular information, that information will not manifest in front of you. So whatever this violent behavior of somebody else which was happening in front of me, I went within me and I refused to see it. I not simply refused to see it, I deleted that information. When I deleted that information, it means it can no more happen in front of me. I am the screen. Whatever is happening in front of me is the movie that is running on my screen. So I will go and delete the information. The movie will run differently in me. It is very difficult to understand, but it worked. It worked. This is one of the things that is a hard nut for people to swallow. logical people to swallow. What is happening here? There are many incidences of this happening after this. This is one very prominent instance of Ho'oponopono. If you read up the literature, there are many other incidents, personal incidents also, people getting healed because of this, etc., etc. So, don't consider the physical layer to be the only one that is communicating with one another. There are several dimensions to existence which is not in our perception, so we have to put some efforts to increase our perceptivity rather than getting stuck with our logic. You can see any number of people using their logic to disable themselves, not to enable themselves, to disable themselves. Somehow argue and disable yourself. If you use your intellect to argue that there is nothing more, only this is the final thing, because everybody is sick, sickness is normal, that is how life is supposed to be, that is what life is. If we use logic to argue like this, it will be disabling arguments. Another simple thing another example that occurred to me just now is that not just human beings, it happens with animals also. This is from a book called Science Delusion. I suggest you read that. People who think they are too scientific. You read that Science Delusion, which shows the drawback of science. It hits on your face. This is one of the things that was pointed out in this book. It is not rigorously proved yet. There is an indication towards this. If you train a dog with a new skill, some new skill which has not yet been employed anywhere in the world, some very new skill, you train the dog with that particular skill in Europe, one or a few dogs. After that, suppose let us say that dog took 2 weeks to learn that trick. It took 2 weeks. Once a few dogs have learned this trick, now somewhere else in the world, say in India, you take up same breed, maybe, I don't know, you take the few more dogs and you try to teach them the same trick. In Europe, the dogs took 2 weeks to learn that trick. Now in India, the dogs will take just 1 week to learn that trick. Now if you repeat that somewhere else again in Australia, if you try to teach dogs the same trick again, they will learn in a day. What that is indicating is when you put some efforts and when a certain pattern is learnt in creation, that pattern is recorded in a common repository. It is not just yours. If people are capable elsewhere, they can access it. Human beings probably they are using their intellect to block themselves and constipate themselves into their individuality. Probably we have lost access to that common resource. But dogs apparently have access to it. Meaning all dogs have a common mind. That is what it is indicating. There is a common repository which all dogs are accessing. Unconsciously maybe, they don't know that they're accessing it. But it is indicating layers of existence which is not in our direct perception yet. Just because it is not in our direct perception, we cannot deny it. There are indications that it exists. So maybe what happens in yoga and meditation is that when a person becomes meditative, he automatically influences everybody else around him. It again depends upon the people's sensitivity also. You cannot influence anybody and everybody. There will be always dependency on both ends, but all this is indicating that we cannot judge people who are simply by themselves and meditative. Don't simply judge them. They are not of help to anybody. You don't know. We don't know. They may be of much more help than we are. That is why Ramana Maharshi used to say this. Once one reporter or somebody came to Ramana Maharshi in Tiruvannamalai and asked him, because Ramana Maharshi never went outside preaching, never went outside popularizing any technique or nothing. He was simply by himself, always in a cave. And people used to flood there. From all around the country, all around the world, people used to go to him. He never went to anybody else. So when somebody went to him, they asked him a question. They said, you are not going out to anybody, you are not trying to popularize yoga or adhyatma. Why don't you go out and help people? This was the exact question. They asked him, why don't you go out and help people? This question is a loaded question. Loaded question means the question already assumes something. So he pointed it out and he said, your question is, why are you not helping people? You have already assumed that I am not helping people. You have already decided that I am not helping, so my answer will be of not much help to you. See, prejudice can happen at very fundamental levels. We don't even know if it is happening or not. We may think we are skeptics, but it will happen at very fundamental levels. And we will use our logic many a times to disable ourselves. Not to enable ourselves, not to empower ourselves, but to disable ourselves, to argue that why I have to remain in a ditch. There is scientific proof that ditch is our normal state. That is what people argue, basically. Scientific evidence shows that everybody is in a ditch is a normal state. And therefore, we are supposed to be like that. Whereas yoga tries to elevate us, they say, even if there is one indication, even if there is one person who comes out of the ditch and says there is something more, you should accept that, even if there is no scientific proof for it yet. If somebody shows you a higher possibility, even if a hint if he shows, you should go towards that. Your logic should go towards that, not towards the ditch. Let us use our intellect to empower ourselves, not to remain in a ditch and disable ourselves, and also not to pass judgment on others as to they are not helping, they are simply sitting in a cave. We don't know.